At the end, it was $17,000 when I was in
Wow.
Tribeca, which is a big chunk for a little gallery. I think that makes things more conservative if you know you have this bill at the end of every month or beginning of every month.
I'm Kate Brown, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from ArtNet News. Last year, Jack Hanley, one of New York's most beloved and idiosyncratic gallerists, announced he would close his gallery after 37 years in business. The news landed with both surprise and sadness. Hanley has always been a disruptor, a dealer with a sharp eye for fresh talent, who followed instincts over market logic, and a gem of the New York art scene. Over the decades, Hanley gave early shows to artists like Günter Fogg, Christopher Will, Sophie Calle, and Christian Marclay, and all of that was long before these people became art world names that they are now. He also helped define the San Francisco scene of the 1990s, championed artists who blurred lines between high and low and made challenging work, and more recently even gave the digital artist Beeple his first ever gallery show. As a former Grateful Dead roadie, an orchid grower, an art fair founder, and having run galleries in several cities in the US, he's seen a lot, and he's played music with more than a few art dealers. Hanley joins me to discuss transformation and continuity in the art industry, and we talk about what's changed, what hasn't, what keeps art interesting even as the market grows increasingly absurd. Hi, Jack. Thanks for joining me on The Art Angle today.
Hi.
So it's been a year since you closed. What's a day like for you these days?
I mean, I stay pretty close to where the gallery was, so that part's not different in terms of getting lunch. But the rest of the day, I mostly take care of my orchids, or I go out east where I've been painting.
You were painting at the beginning of your career in the art world as well, is that right?
Yeah, I had gone to grad school at Berkeley, and then I was like the TA for Joan Brown there, and then got teaching jobs. That's how I ended up in Austin, Texas to teach, and started a little gallery there.
Right. So yeah, maybe you can plot this out a little bit more. When did selling art become a viable idea for you?
It took a while. I'm not even sure if it was viable, but so I was teaching in Austin, and I would always tell my students that they should go to New York and see this show or go to LA and see this show. And then I realized they really kind of weren't going to be traveling too often to either spot. And so I opened a little space for $400 a month and started asking friends if they'd come. They could stay with me in Austin. We could go hear music, and they could have a show, put up some stuff he maybe wanted to show but never did. So there are a lot of works on paper. Some of the people were down there, like Peter Saul did a show twice, people like that were teaching. It wasn't a big plan of mine to open a gallery. I mean, I went to galleries, but it wasn't the part of the art world I was really that interested in. Anyway, I drove past this space that was for rent for like a year, and asked them, and it was $400 a month. And I just thought I could do this. And then I just started asking people if they'd do a show or curate a show or something. But it was a small space.
Because you were on the road with the Grateful Dead for a while, and I know music has always been really important to you. What inspired you to really commit to the art world in the way that you did? Because it doesn't really have the immediacy that music does. How do those two worlds sort of overlap for you, if they do at all?
Well, I painted, so I liked the contemplative part of being alone in my studio. So that was kind of similar to the gallery, pretty low key. It would be crowded for the opening until the keg ran out.
Amazing.
Then it would be pretty quiet the rest of the month in Austin. So it kind of gave me a bit of time to think out some of the detail parts.
So you ran a gallery in multiple cities over many decades. And, I'm curious, as you're looking back on it now, what do you think was the most difficult part about running a gallery?
Getting comfortable talking to collectors was one. Worrying about money, I guess. I mean, I wanted to show wherever I wanted to show, so that kind of wasn't always commercially viable, but sometimes over the long haul it was. But I mean, it was pretty solitary, like in Austin, at least. When I moved to San Francisco, there were more people came. I mean, a lot more people, and the openings would be really crowded, and we'd have a band there.
So you worked with, as you just mentioned, many artists that maybe weren't commercially viable when you first started out. And that's certainly something that you're known for, spotting talent early on. But many of the artists that you worked with, I mean, even Peter Saul, as you just mentioned, went on to become extraordinarily successful. I'm curious what you made of that in general. Like some of these artists became these secondary market stars. And I'm curious how you've watched and witnessed and experienced these prices going up over the decades of artists that you've worked with, that you still continue to work with, but just artists that maybe you work with and then watch them rise to the stars.
I mean, I was always pretty conservative about raising the prices. If they had a notion themselves, or usually if they had another gallery, the gallery would be complaining that they needed to raise the prices because their overhead was too high or something. Yeah, I was always uncomfortable with that part. I thought when maybe their work isn't popular, it's going to be really hard for them if the prices are dangling at a high level or something.
How did you witness that change over the years? Because, of course, you've been through many different cycles of the market, including some big bubbles, but also, in recent years, it's been quite difficult.
Well, partially, I would go to art fairs. I went to a lot of small art fairs and artist run projects that were something like an art fair in Cologne. I went to Cologne a lot. So I think some of the works that I didn't have collectors for, I could put in a suitcase and bring it to London or Cologne or somewhere and sell them relatively easily. So that sort of supported it. I started doing fairs in the US, in New York and so forth, but I mostly like going to Cologne, in the 80s.
I was reading somewhere an anecdote that you had from Cologne about Daniel Buchholz was selling, was it a perfume in his booth and that made people fall in love or something?
Yeah, I have a kid from that project.
Seriously?
Seriously.
How did that go down?
You mean with the kid?
No, so can you speak a bit about that project? Because I think it's also, I liked the story about this, what it sounded like an experimental booth, because it's indicative of a very different time where a project like that would be at an art fair at all.
Yeah, I mean, this fair was really great. It was in an old Deutsche Bank. I guess it was between being renovated or something. This woman that I ended up having a kid with, Heike Kempkin, was the one who ran it and organized it. She invited me to come. I think Christian Nagel and a bunch of other people were on her board group. So I just brought a bunch of works that I could put in my suitcase and went, and it was pretty good. Karsten Holler gave me this little vial to sell for $80 that was like a glass vial with a little stopper on top, and you were supposed to sniff it and it would make you fall in love. And so I mostly had that on my table. And Heike Kempkin, I guess, sniffed it a bunch.
Amazing. It's interesting too, because, you were touched on having gone to a lot of art fairs. I didn't even really realize that these experimental formats were always existing. I thought that, a lot of these alternative art fairs came around in recent years with this, we kind of diagnosed this art fair malaise as a new thing, but this alternative art fair was back in the 90s. It seems like there was always this satellite fair dynamic.
I mean, I don't know if there always was, but I think you're right. There was for a long time. The people that organized the unfair had worked for other fairs and projects and so forth. And so they were just a little bit more alternative anyway, I think. But there were these fairs all around, which I kind of gravitated to, which weren't that easy to sell work at, but they were still interesting, and you'd get to network with a lot of people that were interesting. The unfair, which is what the name of it was in Cologne, was a little bit offshoot of doing the Gramercy Park Fair and the hotel, in Gramercy. The same group of people, I think, had an interest in that.
What was the last fair that you did, and did it somehow inform your decision to close the gallery? I know it was a complex choice, but I wondered if you noticed any big changes in the fairs in recent years.
Well, as the fairs get more expensive, they also get more conservative, because I think people can't afford to make a mistake and swallow $30,000 or whatever they're putting up, probably more. So by the nature of them getting more expensive, it makes it more conservative. I mean, not 100%, but it pushes it in that direction, away from it being more experimental.
Right. You're not bringing a vial of love perfume to sell for $80 when you got to pay $30,000.
Yeah.
Among some of the issues that have emerged, over the years. I know that, as some of the artists experienced more success, some of them did get poached from your gallery in some cases. And that's something you once said that you avoided in San Francisco, but that became quite an issue when you moved to New York. Maybe you could speak about that transition, your move from San Francisco to New York, and how the business model changed in that time.
Well, in San Francisco, there were some galleries that were considered good galleries, but they were, I would say, pretty mainstream, or they had maybe a stable of 10 artists. Pretty much that was what they showed. I mean, I had a lot of friends in the art world out there, but it seemed like there wasn't any kind of an underground art scene like there was with music, for instance. So it seemed to me when I got to New York and originally opened this space on Watt Street, I mean, I was living in the loft in the back of the gallery in New York. The shows were kind of alternative there because the rent was $4,000. But it seemed to me as soon as I moved, the rents had gone way up until like at the end, it was $17,000 when I was in
Wow.
Tribeca, which is a big chunk for a little gallery. I think that makes things more conservative if you know you have this bill at the end of every month or beginning of every month.
And as you said, it puts pressure on to drive up the prices of art because that
Yeah.
really affects your margins.
Yeah. So it wasn't just my landlord or my space. I think everybody I knew was kind of dealing with the same thing. Some of them were pretty successful, given artists or two, but as soon as either the market changed or the popularity of artists changed because of a new body of work or whatever, it seemed like it could really leave you hanging unless you had some outside source of money, I guess.
What do you think could be done about artist poaching? Is there some change that you wish you could sort of have implemented into the art business to prevent that?
I would have liked that. I mean, it happened in music, but there were musicians and bands that I knew that stuck with the same manager and record company and so forth for many years. So I don't think it was specific to art as much as I think people started seeing the art world as a lucrative field where you could make money or something. I didn't ever go into it thinking I was going to like make money, which is what happened. I think it's tricky. You know, people go into similar businesses for sometimes unsimilar reasons.
Right. And I think expectations from artists have also changed over the decades too, right? I'm
Yeah.
sure just as some dealers were not going in expecting to make a bunch of money, artists didn't used to expect to make so much money. And some of them really do now, although that might be changing with the recent tumultuous couple of years we've had. Have you noticed attitudes from artists change over the years in that sense as well? They expect, to be able to buy a house pretty quickly or whatever?
Definitely. Some of them artists I was really pretty good friends with, and they felt bad about leaving and going to a big gallery, but it didn't make them think maybe we should just hang here for another year as we slowly raise the prices or something. I'm not saying it's a mistake that they wanted a house and normal stuff, but it just seems to me that it was a noticeable change. I'd say after the 80s, maybe after the beginning of the 90s. All I know is when I moved back from San Francisco to New York, in San Francisco, there weren't many galleries that were even interested in the art I was showing. So I didn't have a lot of competition in that regard at the time. Whereas in New York, there's like so many galleries that there's always somebody that has more money or more space or more connections, much more competitive.
How do collectors' expectations and attitudes fit into that when it comes to art and value? Like, what did you notice about that changing over the decades?
Initially, the core of collectors that would buy work from me were kind of conceptual oriented people. You know, maybe they wanted it to look nice in their house, but they had an expanded sense of what looking nice in a house might be. And I think constant press about the art world seemed to be about prices at auction, things like that, which start, I think, to filter into people thinking that they can get good art or a conceptual good piece, but it can still increase in value. They can maybe, use it for something else. And, in the 80s or in the middle of the 80s somewhere, I think the art world started getting a lot of press relating to popularity of certain artists and the prices they were getting. And I think that starts to play on in the background, and you start to think you can get a good piece of work and maybe make some money on it. And it seemed to me that the collectors were sort of different all of a sudden than the ones that were early on collecting. A little bit more market savvy.
Yeah, well, speculating, right?
Yeah. Obviously, there was a diverse range, but I don't think that means when they're speculating that they're like just interested in monetary value or something. But it was a big part of considering work.
Did you ever have to deal with the secondary market over the years, and how did you manage that?
Well, sometimes somebody would give me a work back to either trade on a new piece, or they would just have some pressing problem that they needed some money. But I didn't really do that much of that. But all of a sudden, somewhere in the 80s, where the auctions became sort of popular in general, I think people started thinking they could just put it at auction and maybe clean up.
In the pandemic, there was again, another bubble. A lot of people made a lot of money. And then, of course, that's tapered off quite a bit in the last few years. And there's been a wave of closures all over the place, but also quite a few in New York as well. Do you think that there's a silver lining there at all in the sort of cooling off of the market and what it does to maybe bring back some experimentation again in art if people are like decoupling it from big numbers, especially in the emerging and mid range?
Yeah. One problem, though, I think that young artists have expectations that are linked to what was happening when they were in art school, and they would hear about someone graduated and 2 years later they bought a house. And then they would start to think, and not in a bad way, but they would just start to think that they can have a career with being intellectually grounded and make money to buy a loft in Brooklyn. It seemed like there was an expansion of that where I'd say 10 years, 20 years before that, people might have dreamed about owning a place in Brooklyn, but they weren't thinking that it was going to happen maybe next year. So there was more of a integration of commercial things. I'm not saying that that made the artist not a good artist, but because they're kind of unrelated to a large degree, but I just think that it made a different.
Yeah, certainly.
And once your friend has a nice loft, and you're like living in the back of a UPS truck, I think then it starts to spread to that people want to have that too, sort of see themselves as a group that came up at the same time.
Speaking a bit about some highlights of your program, of which there are many, but some more recent ones that caused quite a stir is you gave Beeple one of his first gallery shows. Could you explain how this came about and how this sort of fit into the instincts that you had as a dealer?
I didn't really follow digital artwork. I can't think of the name of the woman, but somebody just asked me if I'd meet people and talk to them I had heard of. And so I said, sure, but it's not like I had some big interest in digital work. But I thought he was really smart and interesting when I talked to him. So I thought it was worth thinking about doing the project. And then it kind of came together. I mean, still had doubts about certain aspects of it, but I liked him and I liked the work enough that I thought it was worth doing it. I knew it was kind of a one-off anyway, so I didn't think it would sell, but
and it sold out.
Yeah, so that in the end really helped out. Where I didn't know anybody that had ever asked me, "Do you have any digital work?" So I had no notion that it would be popular at all, really.
Was it popular with the collectors that you'd known, or was it a whole new demographic of people that kind of showed up to interested to buy?
Well, both. We sold everything. The people that bought work that I knew were probably a quarter or a third, maybe. Then the rest of them were people that it wasn't so much that they were into the fad of it, but they were like kind of serious about digital work. It was like a whole other crew. There was some overlap there, but I think it had been popular. He sold some piece at Christie's or Sotheby's and had gotten attention for being, I don't know, gazillion dollars or something. And I think there were a couple of people that called because of that.
Yeah, well, I think it fits into the story of your gallery in a really interesting way because you were always known as a gallery that did this disruptive program, that you always followed your instincts, and often some of the artists were not heard of in the traditional sense of the art world when they started out.
Yeah, he's a smart guy and he's really nice. And so it was not difficult to deal with him at all.
Mhm. So, you decided to close the gallery at the end of last year, and you said it was mostly because of the rent changing. As you mentioned, the rent keeps going up in New York all the time. But was there any other period over the decades where you just thought, I don't feel like doing this anymore? I can't do this anymore?
Yeah. So in San Francisco, where was I? Downtown. And I closed the gallery and I bought a house in Berkeley and just started playing music again and really didn't go to shows or check out anything for a while. And then opened a guitar store. My brother, also a musician, had played with a lot of people around the Bay Area. After 2 years, I kind of missed the art world and was sick of repairing guitars and talking about strings. So, I mean, I'm glad I did it. And it was kind of a funny shop because I collect rock posters. So the walls were covered with psychedelic rock posters. So it was kind of a funny art show in a way.
Fantastic. Well, it was sort of like a creative sabbatical or something like that.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I just got tired of talking about strings and stuff. Not that the art world is fascinating in some other level, but anyway, I missed the art part.
Right. You must have, over the years, been given some fantastic works of art by artists or collected some things yourself. Do you consider yourself a collector? I know you collect posters and albums, but
Yeah, I have a lot of art. Now it's stored in storage spaces, which sucks. Even at home, so I live with Cindy Sherman and we have a lot of art here and in East Hampton. And I still think that my wanting to have a gallery came out of being an artist. And then secondary would have been being a collector. One missing link was maybe having a good business sense. Not that anyone accused me of that.
is there a work you bought recently that you feel particularly excited about or an artist you feel particularly excited about right now?
I mean, I tried to buy work from artists that I showed usually. Both of us had a lot of work from over the last 30 or 40 years. And Cindy's pretty flexible about me putting up whatever I want. Both of us collect a lot.
Do you have differentiating tastes or do you feel like you can mostly agree?
I think what hangs in the house is where we agree anyway.
Right.
I mean, you'd have to get her opinion. Maybe she's got another take on it. But it seems to me that if I didn't really like something or she didn't really like it, I don't think we'd put it up. But in general, we like the same kind of work. I think some of it's funny element in it.
So, what was the process of closing the gallery like? There's been a lot of closures lately, and we speak a lot about how it is to open a gallery and to run a gallery. But I'm curious, how does one close a gallery the right way?
Drinking a lot. Yeah, it's kind of a project. It's been almost about a year since I closed it, and I'm still paying storage for works I'd like to return to artists that seem to not want it back exactly. I guess they imagine if you have it, there's a better chance it'll sell or something. There are piles of half finished projects. It's tricky because some people were just bummed out because they were going to have a show. And so I felt bad about closing it, but I didn't feel like I had a really great other option. But it kind of drags on for longer than you might think because a lot of the artists were in Europe or Tokyo or somewhere, and shipping is more than the work. And I can't just get rid of the work.
Right. That puts you in a difficult spot, of course.
Yeah. Well, there were some projects, that I had to tell them I'm closing and we're not going to do this or that. So that's not fun either. But most of everybody who wanted another gallery found a gallery pretty quickly, if not in this town, in another one.
Were you able to foster some of that? I mean, I imagine that some of the artists.
I mean, I'm friends with a lot of other galleries, and some artists showed with me, but they could have showed with the other person. And so if I'm not going to do it, then they could show with them.
If you had one piece of advice to give to someone who's considering closing their gallery now that it doesn't sound like the project is finished, but that you're in the midst of still doing it, what would it be?
I think obviously I wouldn't make any impulsive moves because it has more ramifications than you might think at the time. So, well, some of it had to do with real estate in my case. My lease at a certain price ended, and then the new one was like just a lot more expensive. So that kind of thing is different sort of problem. They don't want to negotiate, then you have to find a new space.
Did you consider moving into another space?
Well, it was kind of weird because looking at new spaces up near where Canada Gallery is and all around there, it seemed like the landlords all of a sudden thought it was a hot neighborhood. And so the prices were going up really fast there. Because I would have moved over there, but the prices were going up to the degree where I was already. So it didn't seem like I'd gain anything.
David Lewis, Simone Sabal, Mitchell Innocent Nash. There were a lot of galleries that closed in New York for a host of reasons over the last year. I wonder, did any of those surprise you? And do you have any kind of core concerns about the well-being of the New York art scene over the next decade, with, especially in the wake of all this real estate speculation?
Yeah, so it's tricky because it was always marginal neighborhoods that were where you could go with a young gallery or with an experimental space. And there aren't too many of those unless you get really far afield, like if you're in Queens or in Brooklyn or Washington Heights or something. It's really hard to get people to go to your outpost. I've always found that it's much easier to be clustered around other galleries, which obviously a lot of other people think also. I mean, compared to what like other businesses don't try to be near other restaurants or something, especially. So, but I think, if people are going to go look at galleries, it's just easier if there are 5 of them that they like in a certain neighborhood, and then you go for an hour or two and you go have lunch or something. Whereas if you're getting a spot that's cheaper, which I don't know where that would be in New York anymore, but if you're on your own there, it's going to be hard. If there's 8 galleries in this neighborhood and they're kind of interested in, and you have yours far enough away, I think it's going to be difficult. You'll have your diehard fans maybe, but it's going to be difficult to get people that are going to want to keep going up in a cab and going to a new neighborhood.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, that's something that, of course, in totally different city setup, but in LA, dealers talk about often is like the spread. So, and that's something that, the New York dealers they have many advantages in New York, but one of them is density.
Yeah, I had a space in LA for like 3 or 4 years while I had one in San Francisco, and it was in Chinatown, and there were all these other galleries right around me, and we'd play music at night. It was really great. I don't know what killed that neighborhood off, but all of the galleries left.
So what's next for you now? I mean, you're still in the midst of closing things down, as it sounds like, but you certainly probably have a lot more free time. So, what are you filling your days with, and what's next on the to-do lists?
I've been painting every day. I've been filling my days with torturing canvases.
Any gallery shows coming up?
I hope not, but maybe sooner or later. I'm trying to not even think about that part of it. I mostly paint, and I've been playing more music again and playing with my orchids.
Well, that sounds like a lovely way to spend the time, and maybe a little less complicated than running an art business. Well, it's been a pleasure to chat with you today, Jack. Thanks so much for taking the time to come on.
Yeah, sure. Nice talking to you.
That's it for this week's episode. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, take a moment to rate and review us. It will help other listeners discover what we're doing. The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Manalili with contributions from myself, Ben Davis, Carolyn Goldstein, and Naomi Ray. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.